We can now speak with Stanley Plotkin. He's an American physician who works as a consultant to vaccine manufacturers as well as to biotechnology firms, and he joins us right now. And we're very pleased to have you on. Thanks for your time tonight, Stanley. Look, vaccines are being rolled out at the moment. We know in Russia and the UK too, they're among the first. Do you think these vaccines will make a massive difference to this COVID crisis?
Well, yes, of course, assuming that they are all as protective as we hope. The data from the first messenger RNA vaccines indicate very high efficacy. What we don't know for any of the vaccines thus far is whether they will consistently prevent infection, which is important because if they do, that will prevent the virus from spreading. If they don't, then we have a situation where vaccinated people will be protected, but unvaccinated people will not be protected. So we have a lot to learn about the vaccines.
If that is the case, Stanley, what happens with the vaccines? I mean, do we go back to square one and find a vaccine that means that you will not transmit the virus even if you have the inoculation?
Well, yes, the point is that we have, at this time, we do not have all of the data. We don't have all of the facts. These data are being obtained now by numerous vaccine developers, but they have not been established. So we're waiting for the science to tell us what the reality is. I'm not pessimistic about vaccines at least reducing the infection. Whether they will completely obliterate the infection remains to be seen.
And on what sort of timescale are we looking at then? Would you expect to be able to tell this within the next month or two, or would we have to wait until the spring?
Well, I think we should have data on the first vaccines by, let's say, February or March. But you know, science has to be done carefully, and we need good data that we can rely on, and also data that are disseminated. One of the great difficulties, and I must say with respect to the Russian vaccines also, is the publication of data and dissemination of data, which is a critical point for science.
Just on that point, I mean, people will hear you say this, Stanley, and just as a member of public, they might be considering, should I get this vaccine or not? Do you feel that these vaccines are safe? And I say that, do you think everybody should take them, or can you understand why people might be reluctant?
All right, so the answer to that question, permit me, is a bit involved, and in this sense that yes, many people fear vaccines, and this is true throughout the world. And yet, when one really looks at the record, vaccines in general have been quite safe. Now, the thing that one has to understand is risk. If the risk of the disease, as it is for COVID-19, if the risk of your getting the disease, let's say, is 20%, that's 2 in every 10 people, right? Mm-hmm. And the risk of reactions to the vaccines that I'm familiar with is about 1 in a million. So if you compare the risks, if you're intelligent, you would take the vaccine. But a lot of people have these vague fears. And of course, nothing is 100% safe. There are going to be reactions, but they will be, at least so far, they will be uncommon. whereas the disease is very common.
Sure, no, I take your point. About the long-term effects, though, Stanley, are we guessing what the long-term effects will be? Because how could we know without waiting?
You mean the long-term effects of
a vaccination, yeah.
Well, the data will be collected certainly through the next year. Now, if you're talking about safety, examination of safety is really can be done in a month or two after vaccination. It is very unlikely that there will be reactions beyond that. Whereas if you're talking about efficacy, then you need long observations to determine how effective a vaccine is and over what period of time. Now, that's another issue that we don't have any information on and will not have any information for many months.
In terms of all the vaccines that are out there at the moment, I know there's a handful that keep making the headlines. What's your appraisal, for example, of the Sputnik V vaccine?
I am really unable to answer that question, and let me make this point. You know, I'm old enough. I worked with Professors Smorodintsev, Chumakov, Voroshilova way back in the polio days. So I have great respect for Russian science. That being said, English is the language of science, you know, whether you like it or not. And until we have data in English from the Russian vaccines, it's impossible for someone like me to judge. And so that becomes a critical point. I am currently actually trying to encourage Russian developers to speak at international meetings so that we know what success they're having. So I think that's an important point.
I had seen too that there's talk that they might try to combine Sputnik V with AstraZeneca's vaccine. What are the benefits of trying to combine vaccines? And I would also ask, what's the point if we both know that they are very successful or they have 95% efficacy?
Well, so again, I don't have all the all the data from the Gamaleya vaccine, but the point is this: it's a scientific point, and I hope I can explain it to you. Both the Gamaleya vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine are based on a virus called adenovirus. But the adenoviruses come in many different kinds. And so AstraZeneca is using adenovirus 26 as their vector, and they give 2 doses. But the problem with using 2 doses is that immunity may develop to the vector itself as well as to the inserted protein. So the AstraZeneca people probably feel that they could improve the response by using not 1 adenovirus, but 2. And that was the good idea of the Gamaleya vaccine, to use 1 adenovirus as a prime and another adenovirus as a boost. And that seems to work better. So that's why AstraZeneca is coming to Gamaleya to see whether using one of the Gamaleya vaccines as a first or second dose, I'm not sure which.
Interesting. OK, well, let's move on to the other vaccines, well, in particular the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, because they're using a very new technology. What's your assessment of that? What can you tell us about your feelings for success with these vaccines?
Well, clearly they have been very successful up to this point. And I might say, perhaps the best answer I can give is that that I am waiting impatiently to receive one of those vaccines myself, because they're clearly very, very effective. Once again, there are questions which are being answered, but I haven't seen the answers yet. For example, how long will the protection last, and what effect will it have on people excreting the virus and possibly passing it to others? But the efficacy of those two messenger RNA vaccines is impressive. And this is a platform that will be used for other vaccines in the future. These are the first ones that have been used in such large populations, but I see this technology as being one that's going to be used for many other vaccines.
And can you explain, Stanley, why this technology is so important and why it could be so useful in the future?
Well, so the technology is based on, as I said, what's called messenger RNA. And basically what that means is that you take the code for one of the proteins called the spike protein of the virus, and instead of using the protein, the spike protein itself, you go back to the genetic information for the spike protein. And so when you inject that genetic information, the cells in the human body translate the code into protein. And that protein is then taken to the immune system, and the immune system responds to that protein. So it's a different way of providing to the body, to human bodies, the information which allows them to make a response to the viral protein, which response induces immunity to the virus itself, because the virus itself needs that protein, needs to express that protein in order to cause the disease.
I see. We really appreciate you trying to explain all this detailed information. But just on that point, does that mean then, if this technology is successful in the future, it could be a very quick way of finding an appropriate vaccine to a particular virus?
Well, absolutely. Both the RNA and the DNA approaches, they were able to launch that in a matter of weeks. So that is to launch the production of a vaccine, and that is something that's never happened before, basically. Okay. So this is great.
Yeah, exciting, isn't it? Just lastly, Stanley, we've got a minute or so left. I just wondered what your thoughts are on whether you think that this pandemic has been positive in any way. Do you feel it's brought countries together, or do you feel it's only seen countries compete against one another to try and find this sort of holy grail, the vaccine that works?
Well, you know, it would be rash for scientists like me to make such a prediction. I would hope that it would bring countries together. And I would also mention that what we've seen with this epidemic also is the response of companies in the developing world. That is, vaccine companies now exist throughout the world, and they responded as well as the developed country manufacturers. So I'm optimistic relatively that this is, if you could say such a terrible thing, that this epidemic has been a great stimulus for vaccine development throughout the world.
OK, well, it's a positive note to end on. Stanley, we really appreciate your time this evening. We're going to have to leave it there. That was Stanley Plotkin, an American physician who works as a consultant to vaccine manufacturers as well as to biotechnology firms too. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Right on. Bye-bye.